morning, Neil Sean here in the very heart of London, and welcome once again to On This Day in History. What happened though on this day in history? Well, a very big thing in fact, because it's something that we always see every Christmas on the TV schedules. You know, if I said the words Tin Man, Scarecrow and the brilliantly talented Judy Garland, yes, The Wizard of Oz, that premiered on this day in 1939 in California, cementing Judy Garland as an icon, super talented actress, and more importantly, still remembered today. But of course, the big song from that particular movie was none other than Somewhere Over the Rainbow. Now, did you know this? I was reading a biography a while back about the celebrated MGM boss Louis B. Mayer, and apparently he wasn't that keen on the song, had to be slightly convinced. Judy wasn't overly hot about it either, but you know, could see some potential. It was umming and ahhing as to whether the song would finally go in. But of course, some people, backers, shareholders, heard Judy's playback version and said, that's got to stay in the movie. And of course, with someone like Louis B. Mayer thinking about the money and the shareholders, the song stayed in, and an iconic song and a superstar was born. What else happened though on this day? Sadly, on this day in 1935, we lost another American icon, Will Rogers. Now, he basically was, well, how can I explain it, an all-rounder, an American entertainer, radio personality, film actor, writer, who was kind of famous for his pithy and homespun humour and social commentary. Today you would kind of call him just simply a superstar. Sadly, as I say, we lost him way back in 1935, but his name still lives on thanks to the many movies and of course the iconic associations with many Broadway shows. Now in 1991, were you one of the 750,000 people who attended this superstar's free concert in Central Park in New York City? That's right, Paul Simon from Simon & Garfunkel hosted these concerts. And when you think about it, I can't think of a superstar who's done that really since, given so much pleasure to so many people for free. Of course, he bounced back with another fabulous album a little bit later on, and truly did create some of the most memorable songs of the 1960s. Now, if I say the words Mrs. Robinson, The Sound of Silence, you see, you'll be singing this sort of thing all day too. Now in 1964, another great true Yorkshireman. Oh yes, there's a few of us about, you know, but in 1964, a superstar of cricket who I was lucky enough to meet many, many years ago when I was first starting out in this career, Fred Trueman. He took the 300th Test cricket wicket on this day in 1964, cementing, of course, his superstar status. But for me, Freddie then appeared in many TV ads for things like soap, aftershave, beers. In his gruff Yorkshire voice, people simply adored Fred Trueman. Check him out, by the way. It's nice to look at other people who we've kind of forgotten about, but when you realise did so much on this day in history. Now in 1967, I found this fascinating. Were you one of these people that used to like to listen to those pirate radio stations around the world? You know, the ones that were banned, but you took your transistor underneath your candlewick bedspread, didn't you? And you were listening at night, late. Well, basically for pop music, for fun, and more importantly for things that you never heard on these more staid stations from the BBC. Well, in 1967, the UK's Marine Offences Bill, they made it, well, banned for pirate radio stations to go on air. And this really went straight into effect with stations like London and Radio 355. But a year later, some had bounced back, all thanks to a bit of a glitch in the law. Now on this day, after a very troubled production, some people will remember this movie because it was pretty hot at the time. Apocalypse Now, the Francis Ford Coppola's big hit, was released into theatres and it became a film classic straight away. I believe really for the performances by Marlon Brando and Robert Duvall, whose character famously says that he loves the smell of napalm in the morning. Not quite sure what he meant by that, but it was one of those iconic lines that truly stayed in the movie world, making that one of the highest grossing movies of that year. One thing I didn't realise was this. Did you know that George Harrison of the Beatles fame was the very first Beatle to release his autobiography? I just didn't. I would have thought that was John Lennon. But on this day in 1980, he did in fact become the very first Beatle to, as I say, pen his autobiography. Not many sort of revelations. He was the kind man of the Beatles, a kind man of pop. Super talented in his own right, you know. A far more, I thought, great songwriter than he was given credit for. The same with Ringo. You know, they get passed over. But I think as a sort of foursome, they were unstoppable, as we saw. And George Harrison really was such a nice guy. His book, by the way, you can still buy it online, is called I, Me, Mine. And it was published on this day. And finally, on this day in 1964, another Beatles connection, because one of my all-time favourite superstars was none other than the Rat Pack man himself, Dean Martin. Now, I've been lucky enough to meet Dean Martin's son, Ricky Martin. I know that's confusing, but he is called Ricky Martin. Sadly, we lost him a few years ago, and he just was so like his father, not just from his impeccable dress sense and the beautiful smelling aftershave, but every mannerism you could possibly want from Dean. But on this day in 1964, Dean Martin's hit track, Everybody Loves Somebody Sometime, knocked the Beatles' Hard Day's Night off the top spot in the US charts. What a phenomenon, proving, of course, it's still cool to croon. I hope you like those stories today that happened on this day in history. I'm Neil Sean. Will I see you tomorrow before I get blown away?